Hey friends, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast. If you're new here, I want to say welcome. I'm so glad you're here. And if you've been here for a while, I'm also very, very happy you're here. This podcast is about helping you build a lifestyle that actually supports your health, your metabolism, your energy, and your life. We're not just about weight loss for a season, but something you can live inside of long term. We're thinking the long game, right? And today we're tackling one of the most common and maybe one of the most exhausting questions in the health space. And that is, what should I eat? Right? I'm sure you have thought that to yourself since the new year happened. And full transparency, I am recording this early January. I still have not had this baby, so bear with me. This is the final podcast that I'm going to record before taking my maternity leave, and then I will probably circle back in February and start recording again for episodes coming out in March. But I wanted to give you that little behind the curtain look because I could be 40 weeks pregnant. There's a little bit of ambiguity about my due date, but I'm very, very, very pregnant. So if I sound a little out of breath, if I'm having trouble finding my words, we're still here. I'm still pregnant as of the time of this recording. So bear with me. But I really wanted to keep coming with you guys with some really great episodes, some content that you guys are probably thinking about as you're navigating the new year, as you're trying to figure out, how do I become the version of myself in 2026 that I envision. And so I thought this was a very appropriate topic. At this point, you're probably, 2 months into this new journey or just the continuation of the journey that you've been on. And so I wanted to tackle this question with you. So, if you've been anywhere near Instagram, podcasts, books, or just like the wellness culture, you already know this question feels way more complicated than it should be. We've got one person telling us that carbs are the problem. Another one says fat is the problem. Another says protein is the problem. It's stressing your kidneys. And then someone else says like, well, plants are toxic. They're killing us. And we were never meant to eat any plants. And somehow you're supposed to sort through all of that while feeding yourself and maybe your family, right? So today I want to slow this down. I want to keep it real with you guys as always. And I want to bring you back to something really simple and grounded and most of all sustainable, because I think that is a huge problem when it comes to just talking about food and how to feed ourselves and sustain ourselves in the modern world in a way that's truly healthy. And so bear with me while I take off my vest, because when I record podcasts is also a little funny behind the curtain for you guys today. I'm just laying all the things bare. I get really hot and sweaty, especially now that I'm super pregnant. So I had my sweatshirt and my vest on. I'm like, why did I start recording with this on? I know how this goes. So anyway, we are going to slow this down. We're going to keep it simple, grounded, hopefully sustainable, and hopefully you're going to leave this episode feeling really empowered and equipped, because I want to be clear, this episode is not about following a perfect or quote, the perfect diet. It's about learning how to eat real whole foods that love you, or not, sorry, I said that wrong. Eating real whole foods that you love, but this is then a key distinction, that also love you back. And I say that a lot, but we don't only want to eat foods that we love, we want to eat foods that love us back, right? So before we get into it, guys, quick reminder, I'm not a medical doctor. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your doctor before making any changes to your health plan, medications, whatever, especially if you have significant health concerns. And then a reminder before we get back into the episode, I want to let you know that my online supplement store is officially open. If you've been wanting high quality supplements you can actually trust, this is where to get them, guys. Every product in my store is third-party tested for quality and purity, which is unfortunately not something you're guaranteed when you're buying supplements from places like Amazon or grabbing them at your local grocery store or health food store. These are the same professional grade supplements that I use and that I recommend to my clients. And it's an easy way to support the show, the Lifestyle School podcast. So if you're interested in checking out my store, you can head over to my website, www.hopeflatcoaching.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you will see a tab that says store. Click on that. And if you find something that you're like, oh, I use this product, I'll get it from Hope instead of, at Costco or wherever it was you were purchasing them from. You will need a code to create an account. And that code is 104567. Once again, that code is 104567. And you can order from my supplement store. And if you have any questions about any of that, always feel free to shoot me an email, send me a message on Instagram or Facebook. And if you're like, I haven't been taking any supplements, but I think maybe I want to start, but you don't know where to start, I would highly recommend checking out episode 43 of the Lifestyle School podcast, where I talk about supplements, my thoughts, and I really go over the core 4 supplements that I recommend for the majority of people, and why they matter for metabolic health. So with that, guys, thanks for hanging in there with me. Let's get back into this episode. So I think one of the biggest reasons people feel stuck when it comes to food is because we've been trained really to ask the wrong question. We're asking questions like, what should I eat to lose weight? What should I eat to look differently? Or, essentially what we're asking is like, what should I eat to fix myself? Instead of asking, what should I eat to support my body, my metabolism, my hormones, my energy, or just, my life in general, right? And when food becomes a tool for control instead of nourishment, honestly, I think everything gets harder, right? And it really distorts our relationship with food. Because the truth is that most people aren't struggling because they don't care or because they lack discipline. They're struggling because they're trying to follow rules that were never really meant to work long term, right? And so let's clear something up right now. Maybe you're hitting your goals in this new year, maybe you're not, but you don't need another diet. You don't need quote unquote perfect macros. And you definitely, everyone hear me, because I know this is a big one. You don't need to eat like a, 22-year-old fitness influencer on Instagram or TikTok. I mean, I don't do TikTok, or any of the social medias. Like, you don't need to eat like a fitness influencer. Okay. What you need is to eat food that your body recognizes as food, full stop. That's where we got to start, right? So, in Lifestyle School, we come back to this phrase often, but we have to eat foods that both you love and that love you back. Okay. Because loving food doesn't mean it loves you, right? We've all been there. You can love cookies, you can love chips, and you could really love some drive-through meals, right? But loving a food doesn't mean it supports your blood sugar, your digestion, your hormones, your energy, or your long-term health. And on the flip side, eating quote healthy foods you hate, force or like forcing yourself to eat them doesn't really work either, because you resent those foods. So, I want to be clear that this is about finding the overlap of foods that you enjoy, that taste good to you, and that help your body function better. And this all starts with real food. And, I was recently talking to a client, and they have tried to start over on their health journey many times. And, there's a lot of identity issues that we've been working through together about, they see themselves as someone who can't stick to a diet, or they see themselves as all or nothing. They really struggle with food boredom. And, I've really tried to help them change this concept of, eating foods that they love, but that also love them back. And just having that paradigm of, oh, when I'm eating foods that I both enjoy and that love me back, I don't have acid reflux all the time. I'm not bloated 24/7. Um, I'm sleeping better. Like my body feels less inflamed. That is huge. And their weight is responding really well. Right. And that is just such a paradigm shift versus of like, oh, I have to eat this like chicken and broccoli because I'm trying to lose weight. Right? That's just like boring and you're not going to do it forever. Let's find foods that you can enjoy that are real, right? And that you feel good eating. It's so basic, but I think we've lost the plot a lot of times when we talk about weight loss and food. And so let's get into what I mean by real food, okay? I'm not talking about perfection. We never do over here because we're human. Um, and I'm not talking about never eating anything, fun again. Um, Real food though, just like simply put, food that comes from the earth or an animal, right? It has a short ingredient list and at the end of the day, doesn't need a marketing team to convince you it's healthy, right? Something needs a marketing team to convince you it's healthy. Maybe doesn't fall into the category of real food. Another great litmus test is if your great grandmother wouldn't recognize it as food, that's usually a red flag. There was a huge influx of ultra processed food. I think maybe the 60s, but definitely like the 70s into the 80s, where you have like, the big food companies coming up with ultra processed food. And I want to say like it's over 80% of what's on our grocery shelves stores is not anything that people born in the 1930s would recognize or 40s or even 50s. So, if your great grandmother wouldn't recognize it, that should be a red flag. Okay. Real food tends to be more filling, more satisfying, and far easier for our body to regulate. We talk about dopamine recently, those brain signals that food can really hijack. And real food um, is going to naturally be regulated by our body in much different ways in the ways that it was meant to. And most importantly, it gives your body information that it actually knows how to use. And so when talking about like what should we eat, I'm not a big fan of rigid food rules because I think it can lead to dysfunction in eating. But most people thrive when their meals are built from a few consistent foundations, okay? And I want to be clear, everyone is different, right? What I feel really good eating may be a lot different than what you feel really good eating, and that's okay, right? We all have our own personal health history, what our body has gone through, where we're at in our life, our age, our hormones, our gender, our sex, and that all plays into it, right? Our goals, our activity levels. And so I think rigid food rules really are a disservice. But most people are going to thrive when meals are built from like these foundational blocks, okay? So we want to think of protein as an anchor. Protein, I think, is having a moment. And people would say maybe protein. Protein is trendy. But I would say it's not trendy, it's essential, okay? Because protein supports things like our muscle, our metabolism, blood sugar stability, our satiety, our hormones, and they really help us age well. At the end of the day, that's what we all want, right? And most people, especially women, are under eating protein and over snacking on things like carbs and fats without that anchor. And so protein sources include things like meat from animals, right? Poultry, fish, eggs, and sometimes high quality dairy if you tolerate it. And, this isn't about being extreme. I'm not saying go eat 150 grams of protein at every meal. I think most people probably don't need that much protein. Come at me if you want. That's just my opinion after working with people for 10 years. But there are some people that would benefit from eating 150 grams of protein at each meal, right? Um, it's about making sure every meal actually does something for you, right? And is aligned with your goals and your activity levels. And moving on to carbohydrates, thinking about carbohydrates as tools versus like the enemy, because I think carbs do get unfairly demonized a lot, but there is a time and a place, and really it is person dependent, right? Vegetables, I think personally, should be foundational for most people because they give you a lot of great micronutrients. They can support your gut. They give you fiber, which can help with the clearing of hormones. However, not everyone reacts well to vegetables. And so if you're one of those people, if you find that vegetables don't love you back, then don't eat them, right? And the same goes for fruit and starches. But I think fruits and starches should absolutely be put into your plate based on things like your activity level, your stress, your sleep, your insulin sensitivity. That's a huge one. And where you are hormonally, right? Because personally, myself, I don't do great with a bunch of fruit and a bunch of starches, definitely not with grains. And that's just something I've had to come to terms with because of my insulin sensitivity. My body is just like, nope, we're gonna go on the blood sugar roller coaster if you want to eat it, a bunch of those things, right? And I have to be okay with that, and I have to realize that, and then act accordingly. Where, I, have a male client who is very active, low stress, is trying to put on muscle. They would probably benefit from more fruit and starches, right? So it's person dependent. The problem isn't carbohydrates, though, at the end of the day. For most people, the general public, I'd say the problem is eating refined, ultra processed carbs, disconnected from things like movement and nutrients in real meals, right? So just like finding yourself in the kitchen in the middle of the afternoon, taking chips right from the bag and popping them in your mouth, even if they're made with, they're like the sweet potato, all avocado oil chips, right? They're still naked carbs that you're eating that are going to spike your blood sugar and put you on the blood sugar roller coaster. So they're not going to be probably in line with your health and weight goals. And then, moving on to fat, they are supportive. And some people do well with really high fat. Some people do well with moderate amounts of fat. Some people do better for a time in a little bit lower fat and more carbs, depending on what they're trying to do. Right. What I hope you're gathering from this is that there is no such thing as like a one size fits all for nutrition. You got to figure out how what makes you feel your best while you're eating it. Personally, I love a high fat diet, moderate protein, low carbs. I feel really good when I eat that way, but that's not everyone, right? But fat has to be a part of your diet because it's essential for things like your hormones, satiety, your brain health, and nutrient absorption. Okay. But again, not all fats are created equal. So, we want to get our fats from whole foods, those that are naturally found in meat, eggs, dairy, avocados, olive oil. Those tend to work with your body, unlike, things like vegetable oil or canola oil or what you'd find in ultra processed foods. Those are a different story. And most people are over consuming them. And the real problem when it comes to, the topic of diet is ultra processed foods. And we talk about this a lot, right? Most people aren't metabolically unhealthy because they eat too many potatoes or bananas even. They're struggling because their diet is dominated by foods engineered to override their hunger and their fullness signals. And it's really hard to break up with ultra processed foods because they can be incredibly addicting, right? Ultra processed foods are so easy to overeat. They're extremely low in nutritional value. They don't really do anything for you. They're totally empty calories, and they're designed to keep you coming back for more and more and more. And then, this gets away from being a willpower issue. It's literally just our biology that's like, I need more of this because of the chemical reactions that are happening in my body. And this is why doing like the quote moderation when it comes to these ultra processed foods feels almost impossible. But if you're, shifting away from ultra processed foods, it's going to feel much more natural because real food gives your body like real signals to work with. Okay. Because let's be real, when was the last time you accidentally ate like 5 pounds of steak? I mean, I have pounded some steak, but not 5 pounds, where I could easily eat, 5,000 calories of ultra processed food and not feel well after. But, we've all been there. So, excuse me. I think where a lot of people get stuck is, we keep trying to force ourselves into a diet that worked for someone else, right? But your metabolism is shaped by your history with food, with your current stress levels, your sleep, how much sleep you're getting, how much sleep you have or have not gotten in the last year is even going to impact that. Hormones, I said that weird. Your hormones, how old are you? Are you a woman? Are you a man? Are you in perimenopause? Are you postmenopausal? Or are you, a young active individual? Your activity level is really going to play into it. And then things like insulin sensitivity, right? Two people can eat the exact same meals and get completely different results. And I think at the end of the day, this is what kind of makes this feel overwhelming, is because I think intuitively we realize this, right? But we want someone just to be like, oh, do X, Y, Z, and you'll for sure get this result. And this is where I want to encourage you to take agency over this area. Focus on eating real foods. Pay attention to how you feel when you eat said foods, right? Because, there could be real foods that you eat that aren't loving you back. So just take a step away from them. And then there might be foods that you're like, wow, I feel really good when I eat this. I have a lot of energy. I feel like my body's responding, but it takes time. You got to build that trust with yourself, and you have to be patient. I think we have a big issue with patience in our society. We live in like a microwave drive-through instant, satisfaction society. And this is just takes some time. It takes some troubleshooting, and that's okay, right? If a food, quote, should be healthy, but consistently leaves you feeling bloated, tired, inflamed, or craving other foods, it's okay to question it. And it doesn't mean that food is never going to love you back. You just might need to like break up with it for a while. And I talk about this a lot when I talk to people about food sensitivities. If you have some gut permeability issues, you might need to take some foods out of your diet for a while, like 6 months, and then try reintroducing them and see how you feel. But it's okay if there's, these quote healthy foods. A big one for a lot of people are things like eggs or dairy. If they're not loving you back, your body's trying to tell you something, and it's about time we start to listen to that, right? So what eating well actually looks like in real life is, I think, what we should get into next here. So this is where I want to kind of ground all these things that I've been saying, right? I want to be clear that eating well does not mean having like fancy recipes, perfectly tracking what you're eating, constant variety, and like this huge array of different foods necessarily. Most people do best with simple, repeatable meals, right? Because we're all busy. We all have a lot on our plate, and it takes a lot to change our lifestyle, to change the way that we eat. And so we need to do this in a strategic way that's sustainable, right? And so thinking these three things when trying to put your meals together, I think is foundational, okay? Protein, fiber, fat. As long as, the fiber sits well with you. Over and over and over again, protein, fiber, and fat. So we want meals that leave you feeling satisfied instead of searching for something 20 minutes later. And that's where all of these nutrients really come in. And I just, want to be so clear. This doesn't have to be complicated for it to work. Okay. And then here's where fasting fits in. Fasting is a tool. It's not a punishment. And I think sometimes people use it as a punishment, and I have a really huge problem with that. And it works best when paired with nourishing real food. I always tell people, if you want to fast, you also have to feast, right? It's both. And you don't fast to avoid feeding your body. You fast to give your body space to heal and regulate. And when you eat in a way that actually supports that process, it makes all the difference. And then your body can actually, take that food that you're feasting on, that real whole food, and put it to work, healing and rejuvenating and building your body. Okay. And what you eat matters just as much as when you eat. Okay. So, what you eat and when you eat are such an important part of this equation. And, you know, everyone's need for fasting is going to be a little bit different. I think it's probably one of the best, most powerful tools, especially people with metabolic dysfunction. If you have blood sugar dysregulation, if you have insulin sensitivity issues, if you find that like your sex hormones aren't working properly, you probably have some underlying metabolic health issues. And fasting could be a really, really important tool for you, especially if you deal with also like constant hunger. Fasting is a great tool for that. So, I mean, I've done many episodes on fasting, and this is not a fasting episode, so I'm going to leave it there. But fasting is a tool that definitely plays into this. And so use it strategically, right? And so moving on, um, here are some things that I want you to look for to know that you're on the right track. So my hope is that, as you're trying to figure out this diet piece, you're thinking protein, fat, fiber at every meal, and you start to notice when you have more stable energy, right? Based on the things you're eating, you should have fewer cravings. Your digestion should feel better, right? You should be eliminating once to twice a day, not a whole bunch more, not much less than that. They should be sinking. That means you're digesting the fat that you're eating. Your mood should feel good, right? You should have less food noise. You shouldn't be thinking about food 24/7. And you should feel satisfied rather than restricted when it comes to how you feel after meal, during and after meal time. And yes, if these things are changing, weight loss often follows. And if you can focus on these things like stable energy and fewer cravings, bloating, all that, um, that weight loss is going to feel so much more effortless because you're not forcing it, right? Your body is finally getting what it needs so it can release the fat that it doesn't need, right? So, what I want you to stop doing when it comes to your diet, when it comes to trying to figure out what to eat, I want you to stop chasing perfection. I want you to stop demonizing entire food groups. I want you to stop outsourcing your health to rigid rules. And I want you to stop thinking short-term weight loss equals long-term health. Okay. And most importantly, guys, if you take one thing away from this, I want it to be this: stop ignoring how food makes you feel, because this is really, at the end of the day, the kicker. You got to eat food that you love and that loves you back. We have to be paying attention to how the food we're eating makes us feel. And um, once we start doing that, we can start taking agency over our diet. We can figure out what works for our own specific body and our life, right? So that we're eating foods that we love and that love us back and that get us to the goals that we want, whether that be weight loss or just, other health goals. Okay. So in closing, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's this: you don't need another diet, guys. You need a way of eating that respects your body and your life. And this is what we teach inside of Lifestyle School. It's simple, it's real, it's flexible nutrition that works in real life. And if this episode resonated with you, I would be so honored if you'd share it with a friend. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss future episodes. Leave a comment, write a review. I would be honored if you do that. And, if you're ready to learn how to apply this in a way that fits your body and season of life, I'd love to support you inside of my course, Lifestyle School for Weight Loss. And, if you're interested in one-on-one support, I do offer one-on-one coaching in my 8-week personalized coaching program. My clients have repeatedly seen just really great results. And I actually really need to be better about putting their reviews up on my website, but I'm super pregnant, guys. Maybe that will come with time. I'm a one man or one gal show over here. So, with that, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for listening. Next time you hear from me, hopefully I won't be pregnant. And hopefully I won't have a crying baby in my lap as I record, but we will see. No promises. With that, guys, we'll see you on the next episode of the Lifestyle School podcast.